Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. In the description of this video, you can find my compiled link. Through there, you can find ways to support the channel, my other social media, and more. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. How's it going, everybody? CJ here, back with another video. We're doing a first thoughts today. This first thoughts is on Abaddon, the Despoiler. He's from the 40k, Warhammer 40k Commander precons that are coming out in a little while, and cool new Grixis Commander. Exciting, exciting. And yeah, it's all about cascading. It's kind of like a Yidris Light, but in a different way. It's got like a much more black theme to it. It seems fun. There's going to be a really interesting commander to build around, and I like it. I like it. So the categories I'll be talking about today are ways to make each of your opponents lose life / deal damage to them, so that way you can increase the threshold for cascading. I went with cards specifically that deal damage to each opponent just because it seems like it gives you the damage and the life loss at a better rate. If you deal 1 damage to each person, that's 3 damage across the board, so spells 3 or less, boom. Seems good. So kind of focused in on that. Then we have ways to double the amount of damage you do / double the life loss. We have ways to manipulate the top of your library so you know what you're cascading into, and a bunch of one-off cards. Shorter video today. I couldn't find as much interesting things to add to this commander. It's really cool. It seems very fun, but it's just there weren't as many synergies for me to kind of dig into. This is a type of commander where you could definitely throw more good stuff cards into. That's really all you need. It's cards to make it so your opponents lose life, and then good stuff to cascade into. Yeah, that's really all you really need for this deck. And then ways to manipulate the top seems good. And there are some one-off cards that I am going to be mentioning that seem very good. So the ways that you can make each of your opponents lose life, so that way you can raise the threshold for cascading, include cards like Angrath the Flame Chained. Really nice to have a planeswalker that you can just uptick to deal damage. Brimstone Trebuchet. We got a few Chandras here, including Chandra Flames Catalyst, Pyro Genius, and Torch of Defiance. Torch of Defiance is obviously the best one out of all of those. Court of Ambition seems pretty sweet. Also, it adds Monarch to the game, which is always a fun time. There's Cryptolith Fragment, which makes each player lose 1 life when you tap it for mana, which is really nice. Good include here. I love that card a lot. I run it in my Neheb the Eternal deck. Really fun there. You have Gaeadrone. Seems like a really great deck for Gaeadrone. Hazoret, you get mana flooded. You can discard your lands to deal damage. That's really nice. Ill-Gotten Inheritance seems great. Keen Duelist as a Dark Confidant. Really cool in this deck. You have both the Ob Nixiluses. Fantastic. Retreat to Hagra, so your lands just drain your opponents. Saheeli, awesome card in this deck because it does many things. You uptick to deal damage and scry, so you can kind of control what you cascade into while also raising that threshold. And last one is Sanctum of the Stonefangs. Doesn't matter if you have other shrines in your deck. This card alone, as the only shrine in the deck, can still put up very good synergies in the deck and be very powerful. I like that card a lot. Also, there are many cards that you can add to this deck depending on how you build it. If you're heavy in instants and sorceries, if you're heavy on creatures, if you're heavy on sacrifice synergies, there's lots of other cards you can add to this deck. But I'm not going to dig into every single archetype that you could build this commander around. But some of the cards that you can touch upon, I'm just going to touch upon it. Some of the cards include cards like Gutter Snipe, Impact Tremors, Kakusho, and Kessig Flame Breather. All those very more specific for whatever type of deck you're building, but very powerful. Next up, we're going to talk about ways to double the amount of life lost. You have cards like Wound Reflection and Archfiend of Despair. Both of those auto includes in this deck. Fantastic cards. Then you have damage doublers, which include cards like Fiery Emancipation, Dictator of the Twin Gods, and Furnace of Wrath. Those also very powerful. Being able to double your damage just raises that threshold so much faster. So that way you can just cascade off of everything. Like that. I like that. Next, we're going to talk about ways to manipulate the top of your library. Being able to change what's on the top works really well with Cascade because you can kind of pick and choose what you cascade into. and just kind of be able to filter out duds. So Sensei's Divining Top, pretty good card there. Then you have Scroll Rack. Scroll Rack is one of the best cards, if not the best card in this deck, because you can really manipulate what's going on in your deck by drawing a bunch of cards and then putting cards on top of your library from your hand, either cards that you want to cascade into, or you want to use the cascade to shuffle them away, so that way you can kind of like do the brainstorm fetch land technique with it. It seems really, really powerful, being able to get stuff out of your hand or get stuff into your hand, and I like it a lot. I think that card is going to put in tons of work in this deck. Reality Chip, also really nice, lets you play cards off the top of your library, while also, even if it's in its lowest power mode, you can just see the top card of your library so you kind of know what you're getting into. Doom Whisper, being able to surveil, love that card. I already said Brainstorm, but along with Brainstorm, you have Ponder, Preordain, and Serum Visions. All those seem fantastic. Then you have a bunch of tutors, including cards like Scheming Symmetry and Liliana Vess, and then a bunch of the more generic tutor cards. All those, great in this deck. Being able to literally just go into your library, pick what card you want to cascade into, and put it on the top. Can't get much better than that. And now we're on to the one-off cards. We have a couple of subcategories in the one-off cards, including Storm. Storm seems very good in this deck because you're innately going to be casting a lot of extra spells because you're going to be cascading so much. So cards like Grape Shot and Tendrils of Agony specifically both seem fantastic because they also will raise that threshold of cascading. Then you have Mind's Desire, which is a really fun card, and Empty the Warrens. Not a bad finisher. Then next little category I want to talk about is second spells. Since you're going to be casting 2 spells if you cascade, the first spell cast and then you cast the cascaded spell. So cards like Jorian and Ledger Shredder will be triggering, and you can get some extra card advantage by card draw or conniving. Plus Ledger Shredder has the extra upside of triggering whenever any player casts their second spell, so that's really nice. Next we have some Cascade synergies. Flamekin Herald giving your commander cascade, really cool. Wild Mage Sorcerer, really powerful card there in this deck. And you have Prosper. Prosper can just make you some treasures. Why not? Good include. Next up, we're going to talk about some ways to clone Abaddon, because extra Abaddons means extra cascades, which is really, really good. Spark Double, both the Sakashimas and Helm of the Host should all be considered when you're building this deck. They seem fantastic. And the next little category I'm going to talk about are cards that also benefit off of all the damage you're going to be dealing, because you're going to be dealing a lot of damage. So these cards specifically work really well with that. Rakdos Lord of Riots, especially if you're in a creature heavy deck, seems amazing. You have Chandra's Incinerator. You can turn the damage that's hitting your opponents into also damage hitting their creatures, which is nice. Neheb the Eternal, damage into mana, love it. I love Neheb, awesome included in this deck. Null Spine Dragon can draw you a ton of cards when it enters the battlefield. And Sig River Cutthroat. It can draw you so many cards. It can draw you cards during every player's turn, and you're going to be triggered during your turn most likely, so it's really good. It's a really good card in this deck. And lastly, I'm just going to talk about a little combo-y ways you can kind of build a deck. You can build a deck around trying to cascade into certain cards. So you can, like, if you wanted to, you could build a deck with entirely 5 drops or entirely 3 drops, and just except for a couple of the, like, whatever cards you want to cascade into. So you just pick a mana value that's higher than whatever card you want to cascade into, and you can guarantee to cascade into that card or cards at that mana value, whatever you want. Like, it's a pretty interesting way to build it. It's definitely going to be like a much less fun to play in my opinion, but it's an option. And you could very easily build it so that way you can kind of cast the suspend spells pretty easily without too much deck restriction, so that seems pretty worthwhile. Those seem like they'd be great in this deck. I like the idea of putting those in this deck. And that is everything I've got for Abaddon, the Despoiler. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Peace out, everybody.